Friedrich Hegel, born in 1770, lived in the golden age of German literature. He developed a dialectical scheme that emphasized the progress of history and of ideas and thesis to antithesis to a synthesis. The notion of change of development throughout history is fundamental to Hegel's view of the world. He said that philosophy of history means nothing but the thoughtful consideration of it, where thoughtful consideration means a rational process of development. He believed that history had some meaning and significance, and that the history of the world is none other than the progress of the consciousness of freedom. He called China, India, and the ancient empire of Persia the Oriental world, and regarded China and India as stationary civilizations, societies that reached a certain point of their development and somehow stopped fast. He described them as outside the world history, not part of the overall process of the development that is the basis of his philosophy, because they had only one person who was a free individual, the ruler, all others lacking in freedom, because they must subordinate their will to that ruler. The subjects had no will of their own. The concept of individual conscience is lacking, so there's no sense in the possibility of individuals forming their own moral judgments about right or wrong. In Persia, however, it's different. It's not merely the subject's obedience to the ruler, but a general rule, a law which regulates the ruler as well as the subjects. Persia was based on the religion of Zoroaster, which involved the worship of light. Hegel makes much of the idea of light as something pure and universal, something which, like the sun, shines on all and confirms equal benefits to all. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that Persia was egalitarian. The emperor was still the absolute ruler and hence the only free man in the empire. Yet the fact that his rule was based on a general principle and was not seen as a natural fact meant that development was possible. The idea of a rule based on an intellectual or spiritual principle signified the beginning of the consciousness of freedom. The victory of the Greeks over the Persian emperor meant that the tide of world history has shifted from the despotic Oriental world to the world of the Greek city-states. Hegel sees the Greek world as animated by the idea of free individuality, and that the freedom of the individual is not fully developed at this stage of history. He said that the Greek idea of freedom is a limited one for two reasons. The first being that they allowed slavery, and their democracy required slavery to function at all. The second reason was that they were dependent on the city-state. He claimed that the Greeks had no concept of the individual conscience, and that their motivation to do what is best for the community came from within, which doesn't mean that the person is thinking for himself. They also relied on oracles to make their most important decisions. Hence, freedom cannot be achieved without critical thought and reflection. As we move on to the Roman world, Hegel pictured it as built up from a collection of diverse people, lacking all natural, patriarchal, or other customary bonds, and hence requiring the most severe discipline backed by force to hold it together. The Roman state rests upon a political constitution and a legal system, which has individual rights as one of its most fundamental notions. Thus, the Roman state recognizes individual freedom in a way that the Persian Empire never could. The catch is, of course, that this recognition is abstract, or abstract freedom, meaning that it's only in a legal or formal matter. The real freedom, concrete freedom, is ruthlessly crushed by the brute power of Rome. It wasn't until Constantine came into power that Rome's official religion became Christianity, which opposed slavery, dependence on oracles, and makes all human beings equal. Until a human being recognizes himself as a spiritual being, he is trapped in the natural world, and the only retreat is a negative one, which is that of philosophy. However, the hostility of the natural world ceases to be all that important when realizing the spiritual world, and it can be transcended in a positive manner because there is something positive beyond the natural world. The result is the development of what Hegel calls religious self-consciousness, a recognition that the spiritual world is our true home and not the natural one.